All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this Lang team meeting, 2020, July 27th. Let me quickly look at if there's anything new. Yes, one new MCP. So for today, I guess we'll go over the agenda. Josh and I were just before this meeting talking about refining the MCP procedure and trying to actually move things along. And we could discuss that briefly if we get to it. Hopefully we will. And also the backlog session and that sort of intersects. In the meantime, there's this new MCP that I haven't really looked at. I don't understand what it is. Something about privacy and test. But people should look at that on their own time, I guess. So let's look. I guess there's also a newly created RFC that's relevant. Well, I guess it's not T Lang, is it? Interesting. Arguably it could be, but maybe it's T libs, the way it was categorized. No, maybe it's just not been categorized yet. It's the one to create an error handling project group. I see, nobody put any teams on it. Which I guess I'll put T-Lang and T-libs for now. Yeah, sorry, that was a little confusing. Let's jump back here. So there's some newly created RFCs. I guess working through this backlog, I see one at least is nominated. Working through this is to some extent the backlog plan, and how to handle these RFCs. So I'll skip over it for now. But let's go down through updates on the Lang team project board. One quick update is that I started restructuring this slightly to introduce a better notion of phasing. So we have the incoming proposals, and then I started breaking out the active projects a bit. We can play with this, but depending on their phase. And in particular, brainstorming means not yet, no RFCs. Design means like we're in the creation of RFCs and or other similar things. Oh boy, having some issues. And then evaluation is basically just waiting on people to use the feature. And stabilization. So we can add things in there as we go. I think in particular, there's I'll come back to it. I thought of a stabilization thing, but I think it's nominated. So in terms of updates, async foundations, I would say there's two updates here to be given. One is, I mentioned this last time, but we're still working towards this stream RFC. I have a meeting proposal, actually, we should schedule it, to go over the implications of the stream RFC for the language, but I think there are they're mostly existing issues that may go up in importance if we move forward with stabilizing the stream trade. Then the other is that Boat's proposed an async drop proposal, which would extend the drop trait with a kind of async version of drop that runs sort of a pre-pass that optionally runs to help people do async activities before the real drop runs. They ended up withdrawing that RFC for various reasons, but among them was, well, basically there were some significant issues raised, if nothing else, that we'll want to look into, in particular how to manage panics, as well as some concerns about whether it's the right approach, though I think the alternative of full linear types is probably a challenging one to really do. The usual concern about drop, I guess. But anyway, that's sort of stable for now, but may come up later. The idea was that the async project group may pursue it. Project Safe Transmute, any updates here? Does anyone know? Probably still the same as before. You're muted, Josh, but I think you agreed.
I didn't realize I was muted, but yes, same status.
Okay. So tainted fallback, and the only, I think I may have said this already, but I'm working with Blitzer on it. There was a comment, but it's a pretty dramatic proposal to introduce this inhabited marker trait. I didn't respond yet, but I think that's a lot. I don't think we want to go there, or at least I'm not ready to do that. Real updates other than that. No updates on this one. Const evaluation, we don't have anyone here from that group. I guess no updates. FFI unwind. As far as I know, the major update here is that we're waiting on the RFC to be done. I think we decided to go with C-unwind.
Yeah, that was the fallout from the bike shedding.
Okay.
Nobody cared enough to push for the space, so why not change it?
Yep. That RFC is in FCP, so once that's done, this will move over to the next category, I guess. So in that topic, I landed this instruction set RFC. I made a tracking issue. I think Locathor said that they were gonna try to find someone to implement it. They had some candidate in mind. I'll follow. Hopefully we'll find someone. This, I guess I'm gonna close. This is done now. Inline assembly, any new updates? Since it's an evaluation, I think I won't write anything unless there is something. Josh, nothing. Okay. This week for meetings, we have, what is our plan? I think we're discussing this WF checks and type aliases, finally. I'd like to schedule this stream trait and related issues for next week. Maybe I'll ping some of the folks. I'll do that later. All right, let's move on. PI issues. The usual two. No real progress. Nominated PRs. Got two. That I want to add to the list of stuff to discuss. So panic box. So what's happening here is that, let me remove these old notes. I think we talked some about some of this. So this is just a proposal to make everyone aware, I guess. I don't think we have to decide this right now or anything, but there was an RFC, this RFC to allow you to write, happening. There was this RFC to let you write format strings in a more concise way. You all remember the context. Does anyone not remember?
Yeah.
So today, this throws a stick static, at least withstood panic. So the proposal here is basically to add a second macro for edition 2021. Since the behavior of this will change, the idea was, well, why don't we say that the standard panic macro always throws a string. This is in edition 2021. Panic always throws a string no matter what, and panic box or some other name throws the value you give it. So, and this would not be a macro, I guess. It doesn't have to be, it would just be something like this. There were some other names proposed, like start unwind or something, but it doesn't always unwind. Panic with, which is okay, except that I pointed out that we often use with to mean closures, like.
Right.
I don't know
Also,
what's happening here, but
I'm curious, you said throws a string, but strictly speaking, it should just print a string and then unwind, and it doesn't actually ever need to fully materialize that string by mallocing, right?
well, catch unwind gets a value that was the sort of panic value, and so it can have to materialize it. Yeah.
Really? I had no idea. I thought that it always just printed and then unwound.
No, I mean it prints, it unwinds, but yeah, it has a value that gets thrown up the stack kind of if you're unwinding. And the problem is even if you just had like panic where no substitution is required, I think the proposal here was to still create a string, capital string, because otherwise it's sort of you would get this like surprising edge case where sometimes it's and tick static stir and sometimes it's capital string, and you can't like control when can't predict which you'll get. So there is a sort of meta question here. First of all, there's the details which we could discuss, but I'm a little bit also interested in this ties into like edition 2021 planning, and you don't have to go into it right now, but at some point I would like figure out like I feel like we need to be tracking these things and deciding them, or just making sure that we're making progress. And actually, I think Aaron made a project board. This probably isn't like purely Lang team job. Back 2021 RFC that I created specifically proposes that we make a project group to do that tracking. You have to make sure we're not overlooking stuff. Anyway, that's why I nominated this, was to mention it. Any comments or thoughts?
I'm curious how this interacts with no standard. I was just making a note. Is there a fundamental reason that this needs to involve box and string and allocation? Because it seems like you could have a no standard platform that nonetheless supports unwinding and just prints the message and then throws away the message so that it doesn't have to allocate and then unwinds.
There is a fundamental reason, which is that we need to use din any, that means it needs to be a pointer, which means we need to specify the memory allocation strategy used for that pointer. However, core panic may do what you just said. I don't know exactly what core panic does.
That's what I get. Yes.
I mean, like core panic could throw some fixed value, for example, which
Sure.
maybe Mark remembers or knows. But,
yeah, I don't remember what Core Panic does. I think that sort of one concern I would have is that in some sense, this is sort of stable API in that like what Panic foo does, if we start making that return a tick static string versus a capital S string, then creates the currently downcast to just tick static string, for example, because their no stood would stop working in some sense.
So it would be an addition transition. So we would translate old panics into a different, like panics that might change behavior would go to some alternative, basically go to panic box, so that they don't. But it's still it's a migration for sure. Does that address your concern or not, Mark?
Sort of. I guess in some sense, the fundamental aspect of this is that like, even if we address the surface API, like how you panic physically, you still have the sort of edge of when you're catching that value, currently it matters a lot what the type was, even though ideally, like what I think Josh is getting at is that in some sense, ideally what we would be throwing is something like a arguments from format, so that you don't actually like, we want to be more opaque, but we want to be able to print it, like a din debug or something like that.
So Josh, the answer to that is no, because that would defeat the whole point of this RFC. Like the point of the RFC was to allow you to write that as a convenience, because it's so often that that's what people want to write.
So I want to clarify something. What I'm talking about is there's a compatibility concern here, which is that today you can panic with a simple string and it will always work no matter what that string is. What I'm suggesting is not that we prevent that from working, it's more that we specifically look for format string arguments like this, and in the new edition, after we move across the compatibility boundary, we reject a panic that would pass a thing that looks like a format string if its format string arguments are not satisfied.
But the point is, that's what we want
on print.
Right. But here's what I'm saying: that today you would write this, right?
Yes.
The point is that under this RFC, the goal is to allow you to just write this.
No, I agree, and I'm saying you should be able to as long as there's an X in scope.
Oh, well, of course it's going to be an error if there's no X in scope. Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless maybe I misread the RFC, but I would assume it's going to be an error.
Yeah, it would be an error, but that's my point. It is and going to be an error if you do that with print, and the only reason there's a compatibility today, at least, if you don't have any arguments, if you wrote that, we would treat that as, oh, this is just a string, so we should just throw a string. And if we treat it as a format string instead, there's currently today a special case for one argument panic, which doesn't bother checking for string, which actually is error prone because then it won't tell you if you got something wrong. I'm going to double check that on the playground because honestly it's surprising behavior. I think the only thing we might need to change in the compatibility boundary on the edition is just single argument panic could still be special, but only if single argument panic doesn't have any format string specifiers in it. Otherwise, we'll error out.
Yeah, it's just that then that just seems like a usability, like it just kind of sucks. That's all for the user, because now they have to know.
Why is that a usability issue?
Because now they can't write. Now they can write println like error is error or something, right? And that works.
Right.
But if they write panic bang, the error is error, they get an error.
No, I'm saying that both of those should work if error is in scope.
Yeah, but I feel like, I guess I don't think it's going to be a very normal case for error not to be in scope, or that they would get a.
No, it won't be. That's my point. I'm saying, as far as I can tell, there is no compatibility issue across that requires an addition boundary, except that today, if you do a single argument panic with a thing that looks like a format string, we don't give you an error because you might have meant to throw a string that had curly braces in it. And on an addition boundary, we could say, no, it's always a format string. And if it contains any format string specifiers, we'll check it at compile time and give you an error if you didn't have the right things in scope or pass them to the macro.
Yeah.
And then if you pass a string that doesn't look like a format string, it's treated as a one argument panic just as it is today, which means the only compatibility boundary here is what if you had a one argument panic that had curly braces in it?
Okay, so I think I agree with everything you're saying, except maybe I'm not understanding. So, all right, hold on. So the options are, do we all agree, or the scenarios are, you have panic who in 2021, where foo is in scope. We want this to be equivalent to right? We want, where it's not in scope, we want this to be a compilation error, which is, and then we have panic 2021. And I think what you're saying is this can continue to be, this be to 2018. And in particular, i.e. raise a string, or i.e. raise, yeah, sure, right?
Right.
I think, yeah, I agree we could do that. I think the reason to make it, the reason that, it's, first of all, this maybe is a little bit of a libs concern, but the reason that it was, like, I'm not totally 100% sure how much this is laying, but the reason that it was proposed to change this latter case was basically that it's confusing to some, it's like a bug waiting to sometimes raise an answer and sometimes a string, that people don't really expect that. And so it would be better to just have a uniform sort of panic macro always raises a string, panic box always raises exactly what you gave it. And now,
Sure.
you know,
There's certainly a good argument for that, and the advantage there is also, I mean, if you have box, then you have memory allocation, which means you could have string. So it's not the end of the world to change that behavior. I'm more just saying this is not something that is a requirement for implementation. We're just deciding what the most usable behavior is.
so Mark's noting some notes. Formatting to string is delayed until the panic is actually captured. Is that true, or is that something we would want, Mark?
That is currently the case. So if you panic with like a formatted, like the, let's see, this case here,
Yeah.
when I put X's in front of,
Yeah.
in core, that'll never allocate because we can't. And then if you use stood, and then you don't actually have a catch unwind anywhere in your call stack, that'll just, it won't allocate, it'll just do the format arguments thing. And then if you actually sort of examine it and try to get a string out of it, or any other type, right? If you do catch unwind, we're
Okay.
forced to allocate a box, and then we fill in the string.
So
Okay.
let's step back a little bit, because I think we need to box this and move on. Josh, I see you leave some comments, but I feel like it seems clear that we should have somebody open up a exact proposal, and we should FCP it.
Okay. One thing that I think would be valuable would be to talk about where the relative scope of lang and lib here is. I would propose that within it is entirely lib scope to decide what the behavior of single argument panic should be in terms of should this be a static stir or a string. That's a usability change that if they want to make that across an addition boundary, I don't think we need to say anything about that. It makes sense. The argument makes sense, but there are trade-offs there. I would propose that because panic is a built-in macro that has kind of magic behavior that can't today, as far as I know, be implemented entirely in the library, it may make sense for us to specify the change from panic with single string, even if it looks like a format is, not an error, to panic with a format string is an error if you can't satisfy the format string. Oh, it is purely library code? Does it just call format args?
Essentially, yeah. The only sort of interesting bit about panic exclamation mark is that it's defined twice. There's a core panic and there's a stood panic, which
Right.
means that sort of
Yeah.
you get weird behavior if you're using a crate that's no stood in a
Right.
stood
Okay.
using application.
Okay. So if it's defined entirely in library code, I'm assuming it just has two branches, one for single argument, which doesn't even check if it's a format string, and one for multi-argument, which calls format args.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. So this does seem then like it's mostly a libs question, but I would propose that it seems like an addition boundary would be a good place to try to change change the behavior for this looks like a format string to be a compile time error if it's not a valid format string.
Yes, I think that is the expectation.
Right. And then anything beyond that of like, should we change from stir? Or if libs wants to make that change as well, by all means, but none of that sounds like our call.
I think that's right. I take the laying side of this is like most of these trade-offs feel more like libs, and we can advise, but it's ultimately not to libs. But the laying part is probably just, is it a format string or not, if it's anything, and moving. I'm mostly in favor. It feels like a pretty edge case. I think most people don't catch panics and so on, so I'd be in favor of migrating to a smooth strategy, basically. But very good. I don't know if we even need to make a comment at this point. I'll make a comment to the effect of this is really libs call.
Yeah. Would it be fair to say that Lang's general suggestion is we'd like consistency with print, and beyond that, whether, however it gets to handled, then that's fine?
Yeah, I agree with that. I strongly agree with that. Like that seems, it has to be true. Okay. So make const evaluatable more strict. Does anyone know what this is? Shall we skim it briefly? We currently forbid anonymous constants which depend on generic types. Oh, okay. So I think there was some kind of bug, right? We talked about this in the meeting, I remember now, or somewhere we talked about this. There was a kind of bug about wanted to prevent people from depending on constants, but we sort of failed. We'll come back next week when there's a creator run. Let's talk. Okay. Where are we at to now? Nominated issues probably. Right, so raw ref macro. I like to add this to the project board actually. So we encouraged Ralph to write up something about raw ref macro, stabilization report. So raw const and raw mute. They did so. I've moved to stabilize it. You should all check your boxes. I don't think there's anything new to say here apart from that. Any comments? Okay. Oops, let me remove the nominated tag. There's this is what we were just talking about. The whole formatting argument macros thing. So I'll skip past this. Periodic compatible functions. I did this. This seems like an interesting old thing. I was just wondering if anyone has any idea what's happening here and if we like, is this something we could plausibly stabilize at some point?
It is. There was a little recent act on this where somebody, you already noted this in a comment, but we should mention in the meeting that somebody realized that you can't actually do this with functions that are inside of a object, non-free functions. And they are currently implementing support for associated functions and similar. So that should probably bake for a little bit, and we shouldn't immediately stabilize that support immediately after it goes in. But if we separated that out, I think the regular variadic support has already baked for a while, and I think it's probably ready to have somebody make a stabilization PR and a stabilization report.
Okay, is that, I feel like it's not worth breaking up the feature gate.
It probably isn't. This isn't super urgent, so we could also just wait a release to let the new support bake and make sure it has enough tests.
Okay, that works for me. Josh, do you want to leave a comment about that? No,
Sure, I can do that.
Nominated RFCs. We got them. There's two nominated RFCs. One of configuration predicate. Why this was nominated. Summarize what's happened on that RFC so far.
Oh, you're sharing froze there for a second, but it's working now. I'm checking.
So you nominated this one of.
Yes, I did. So I wanted to give a quick explanation for what this was. So the proposal was to have a new configuration predicate to go with all and any, which is exactly one of these things is enabled and no more or less. This is useful when doing things like here are some mutually exclusive features you may wish to enable, and or very commonly mutually exclusive platform tags, like you either need this feature enabled or you need to be on this platform, that kind of thing. That is really painful to implement otherwise, because you end up doing a combinatorial explosion of A and not B and not C and not D, or not A and B and not C and not D, and so on. It would be nice to have a built-in predicate for this. There was some discussion around it to cover the fact that the majority use case is just erroring out. There isn't normally a case for like config one of blah blah blah, define a function. It's much more commonly config one of these, compile error otherwise, not one of rather. So there's a question of, is this the right predicate, or should it be more specialized for error if these aren't mutually exclusive, and then just semantically define them as mutually exclusive? But nonetheless, I still think this is worth doing, and it seems remarkably small as a change to the surface area of the language. So I'm wondering if it could be taken through the MCP process as a simple case of, we'd like a solution to this problem. Is this the best solution to this problem? And I wanted to nominate it to see if anybody else thought this was reasonable.
So I have a few questions. First of all, would you be serving as the liaison if we did that? And secondly, well, let's start with that one.
It seems small enough that sure, I would ideally love to see somebody else pick it up and run with it. I think we had a couple of other people interested, but I was more nominating it because I felt like it was simple and straightforward enough. I could do it if nobody else does. It wouldn't be the top thing on my backlog.
So it's simple and straightforward, and yet, like the RFC as written, maybe doesn't. There's still some exploration required before we want to land it, right? That's your position. Is that right?
I'm sorry, the last sentence cut out.
Basically, the problem is simple and straightforward, but the RFC as written, maybe we want to explore a few alternatives first.
Right. Well, I wanted to raise that question. If people feel like this is the obvious solution, we could just FCP it. But I think it might be worth some discussion of, is this the right solution?
Yeah. So I have two thoughts. I mean, the first thing I thought was what you just said, that is this really a predicate in the same sense, or is this more of a declaration? And my second thought is that, at least with like cargo features, people often, there's a kind of, can I say this? People often make mutually exclusive features, but that's kind of a bug because cargo assumes it can union together any sets of features, right? I guess this is not the case for like other sorts of CFGs that cargo doesn't manage. So I was wondering if it makes sense to, like, exactly what kind of configuration flags are we talking about, and does it make sense to bring in cargo people?
If we want to do this in cargo TOML instead of Rust, then it would make sense to bring in cargo folks. But given that we're talking about something that would be arbitrary CFGs as opposed to just feature flags, like if this were just, I want to declare a set of mutually exclusive feature flags, then that should be cargo. But this is, mutually exclusive config possibilities, which could be things like target pointer size. Like one of the reasons I wanted this recently was compile time error if not one of target pointer size is 32 or target pointer size is 64.
Which seems like, okay, I guess that's awkward to express today, but not. You could certainly imagine a macro that, especially, don't we have an error, like a compilation error macro or something? You could certainly imagine writing that kind of statement, like having rate make such declarations, and maybe even. I guess I agree with this way. I guess I believe it would be nice to have something here, but I agree with you that I'm not convinced that the one of configuration is the right solution, and it seems like it might rather encourage people to encode weird things. But like you could certainly imagine writing some kind of macro that's like error unless one of.
Yeah, I think the RFC thread like even covered, like somebody suggested a separate macro that would be a way of saying these sets of things are exclusively like, you know, shouldn't have these things combined together, which I am inclined to think is, for some reason in my head, I see the error detection as orthogonal to the, you know, the config flag business. It would, unless someone can show me a case where you actually want a non-error behavior when you have more than one of them set. You know, it's something where you have two different non-error behaviors, and one is for one of and one is for every other case. But it seems like from the examples I've seen, it's usually more like there should be an error if you have more than one of these things set, for the examples I've seen.
Even if there is a case, we know that the error behavior is by far more common, right? Or it's at least a distinct use case to error if some combination of these, if one of these things is not met. The other thing about pointer size example is that those things are mutually exclusive. Like for exterior reasons, it could never be true, right? That they're both true. Like you could also error if not any. Anyway, long story short, Josh, I think I'm fine with MCP process. If we find.
Okay. I'd be happy to, I'll drop the nominated tag and make a note saying that we'd be happy to see this go through the MCP process.
Okay. So, which brings us to the end of our, let's see, almost to the end of our official agenda. So raw ref macros, checklists for things people could use, raw ref macros, weak as pointer T. Felix, do you want me to, I don't know if Felix or Josh, if you wanted to discuss that. Pointer offset from the main ones.
I'm not in a position to discuss it.
Okay. Which brings us to these other things. So I kind of already covered what I wanted to say about edition 2021, just that we should I guess I'll point to the RC again that we had. And I'm planning to make this into a real RC, but one of the things I wanted to do, which I haven't quite finished doing, that's not it. This is it. I added like a brief agenda, or brief agenda that goes through some of the migrations that might occur, and I wanted to go make sure that was complete. I know we had some notes, but the short version. I'll read the RFC. I already talked about it in the prior meeting, unless anyone has questions. So the backlog thing, I guess there was only Felix that wasn't in it, who's in this meeting now, but we did go over, what did we call it? It had a funny name. Backlog Bonanza or something? Yeah, there we go.
Yep.
What we did, we decided to start by going through pending RFCs. And we went through ultimately went through like, no, more than 4, I guess. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But what we ended up deciding was that we would go for one of these next step options. Either we would try to close it if we felt it didn't fit our priorities, or that we would suggest filing an MCP because we thought a project group would be a good fit. This would occur if we thought the problem was either small or self-contained or tie it to a priority. And if we thought that potential solutions this wasn't obviously the right answer yet. There might be some room to explore the possible solutions first. And then that would mean then we have to we may end up closing that because there's no liaisons around, which Josh and I were separately discussing, but come back to that. But otherwise, we might suggest merge in some cases where we kind of knew who would want to do it and we thought the solution was the correct one. This would probably be unusual. And the final thing we noted is a few times it seemed like some of the things that were proposed as Lang could really just go to compiler team. So I haven't actually acted on these, but I think I will soon. I guess I won't run over them. Just give an example or two. So there was a proposal for allowing back traces and macros to better integrate. And we kind of felt like that was more of a compiler team quality of tooling issue more than a Lang team thing. So that we would say it's better to experiment and make a compiler team MCP and maybe decide whether to stabilize if there are any language changes after the fact. But stuff like eager macro expansion, this was a tough one.
It is a tough one.
Best to get some opinion from people, but this one would be like, ideally we would have wanted to encourage an MCP, I guess, except that we don't know that we have a lot for it. These are some tweaks to derive. These seem like they could fit an existing priority of a targeted ergonomic win that was in our list of priorities. But we would want an MCP because it's not clear who would want to do it. And the only one I think where it was like maybe we would merge it is I kind of thought I would be willing to help push this along, which was Simone's old proposal. It was already the outcome of a lot of iteration. So that's what we did then. I think what I'd like to do is actually just keep working on this until we're done. And I was thinking maybe I'll call it a project group in and of itself, like the back of my hands. I'll probably one thing I'm looking forward to is as we go through the tracking issues, I think that'll inform it's going to start to be a lot of stuff that we should be tracking, and we'll probably have to prioritize some of that, and that's okay. Any thoughts on that, or should we go on from there? So the last thing was MCP procedure. So Josh and I were just talking about this before the meeting, trying to get a little more hammered down on exactly how does a major change proposal get approved and what do we actually do? This was also discussed some on Zulik. I think what we're going to propose, what we were saying was that we would say potential. So I've been reaching out to some of the external liaisons we talked about, but potential liaisons would assign themselves or be assigned. And in this meeting, we would look quickly and tag with sort of charter needed or something if we had a generally positive note, and we had some ideas of what the point of that looking would be. Basically, we'd be looking for things we thought the charter should cover, like concerns that we might have that we would specifically want to make sure don't get overlooked, but also potential gotchas in the form of, like, you may not realize it, but that's a really complex area that's been discussed a few hundred times. And maybe we don't want to do that, or maybe you want to make sure you have this person or that person as stakeholders. Some of that discussion we might want to do more in private, it depends, but I think it's good to have it officially down as like things, so missing stakeholders, no prior attempts and precedent, missing stakeholders. And the other concern would be either that it's too much work and not a good fit for the moment. So this would be kind of, if we felt like the work is too big a job, we should be able to note that at this time. But the idea would be then that the liaison works with the
But by too much work, you also mean like the technical debt incurred by it, right? Because there might be some people like, I'm willing to put in the work, but that's not the point of that response, right?
Yes. I think it's specifically like, that's right, technical debt incurred, and kind of like, and or maybe this fits under missing expertise, but I think it's sometimes the case where you can't do that work. Like the work will end up being,
Right.
the team will get involved because it's going to impact different parts of the language and so on, and it can't be isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. Missing expertise is a very important bullet point there. Absolutely.
So I think my classic go-to example for this is the never type, which we had a really willing person who was pushing on it, but that's turned out to affect like everything in the language in some way or another. And it was just not, in retrospect, I don't think we realized what a big job we were taking on, right? So the idea would be then that the liaison works with the P author to write a charter. This doesn't have to be a lot. This can just be a copy of the MCP. If it's, I'm going to write a little template, but like it shouldn't be a big job, and opens a PR to close the, to add charter and close the issue. So this is the stage where, like, we currently have some pending MCPs. We have some that are even assigned, but we haven't had this meeting and we haven't seen anyone like actually write a charter. So that's where we're at, I think, right now. And then from there, that would open an issue that we track, and they work towards an RFC. Right. Yeah. It's fine. Does that sound reasonable to people? Or any thoughts on this so far? I think one thing I'm having some pretty severe doubts about whether we should try to push all the chat to Zulip or not. But on the other, it's something I would like to go back and forth about a little bit. I'm a little concerned about it narrowing out the range of people. There's pros and cons, but narrowing out the range of people who comment and making it harder to follow along. On the other side of it, if the goal of MCPs is really to get Lang team feedback and then create a project group, which will take place on Zulip, it kind of makes sense to get people, like, if they can't get involved in Zulip early on, that's not going to work out so well.
You're worried that Zulip is going to be too much of a filter. It's going to be exclusionary, or that then the backlog there is going to be a problem. You mean?
I'm worried about both. I'm worried that it will be a filter, but also that it won't be. Like that the Zulip will become too. If people are opening things sort of half baked here, like that, it could wind up being too much discussion and we can't sort through it. That Zulip feels more usable now because it's kind of focused. And if it gets too much, you know, arguments happening, that will be lost. But I don't know. I guess we can only try it and see, perhaps. But
I have to believe. I don't know. My initial instinct is it has to be better than GitHub, than just what we've been doing by using GitHub comments as our.
I think as long as we haven't done we have not done a great job of, but I think we're going to get better at it is actually being relatively prompt. But I think as long as we sort of, in particular, how can I say this? As long as we kind of try to keep the conversations focused on and moving, like not let them get too aimless, it should be fine.
Right. And the other thing about Zulip is you can be proactive about, you can proactively say, you know what, someone forked the thread here. We're just going to alpha rename the messages from this point to be the fork. And,
right.
You know, you can do that with Zulip. You can't do that with GitHub.
I guess I feel like, especially if something seems like it's too early and it should be discussed more on internals first. Anyway. All right, I think I got to run. We're about out of time, and I'm hearing some local concern, some offline charter. See you all there.
Good luck.